also part of the European Women Payments Network. I was part of founding the network more than 5 years ago now, and I've now moved into the advisory board, but I'm still a very active part of that, and of making sure that that there is more focus on diversity in the payment space. I'm sorry, I sound a bit distracted, but I hear like a beeping noise.
No, I don't think there's anything
You
from
can hear, so it's me that hears that noise.
Okay. No,
Okay.
I can't hear anything.
It's really weird. Anyway.
Yes, I've been following the network on LinkedIn, the Women in Payments Network. So it's great to see so much activity taking place and raising awareness of those issues. So yeah, I'm very appreciative of your efforts in that area. So moving on to the main thrust of the white paper, looking at what's happening in corporate payments now. Obviously, COVID's had a massive impact over the past 18 months. So can you describe how that's affected corporate payments in particular?
Yeah, so I always feel that corporate payments are also impacted on how consumers pay. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, even before COVID, is that corporates were looking for a more seamless, more digital way of being able to organize their payments. When you think about it, corporates pay quite a lot of money to banks to manage their payments. And what they're experiencing is something that is much less slick, much less organized than and easier to deal with than it is on the consumer side. So I think that's a prevalent trend where corporates are turning around to financial institutions and challenging them to help them digitalize and make it much more easy and seamless than it is today, much more integrated into all of their systems. And then obviously with COVID, that has incredibly impacted the drive even further to digitalization. And that is true for corporates as well. And then one of the key challenges that corporates experienced is because some of the corporate payments are still we're still very paper-based. COVID really impacted that, and it's really given that digitalization of corporate payments an extra boost. Yeah. And I think one of the ways of really bringing that out is commercial cards. So in the United States, there was $1.1 billion, sorry, I'm saying $1.1 trillion dollar spent in corporate cards, and that trend continues globally. That drives more commercial and corporate cards. But at the moment, that's only 10% of the payments in Europe, because that can help digitalize and integrate better into your systems. We believe that that is going to increase over time.
Mm-hmm. How would you describe the impact on the travel and entertainment sector? How likely is it that that will recover to pre-pandemic levels in terms of volumes and spending?
So I think on the travel and entertainment sector, you can see the entertainment sector coming back really, really quickly. But obviously the entertainment sector is impacted by travel, and travel is just taking a lot longer to get back to, what I would say is normal. I'm expecting consumers, so we're expecting, I think the world's expecting consumers to get back to their normal travel. But business travel, I think, will be impacted forever by what happened with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
In that, I think from a business travel perspective, we've all realized that we hadn't been using the modern tools that were available to us in the way that we can. And so the level of travel, we're not expecting to come back to that, but obviously it'll recover. So and potentially, it was accelerating so much the rate of business travel. So that may come down, but at some point it's going to even out. I think though one of the key things is it's still very important for people to meet each other.
Mhm.
And we also realize that virtual can't completely replace. What I always find personally is it's important to meet people at least once in person, and then everything becomes easier. And so, events are going to kick off again because, trying to do networking in virtual is really, really tough. Most people don't enjoy it, don't get that out of it. So vets will come back, and then okay, let's at the beginning or in the middle or get together to bring that together. And then obviously because we're digitalizing, that's where a lot of the effects of commercial cards can come in to help bring all of that together. So we're bringing out a product called ExpressPay, which brings virtual cards together with the travel industry and will make it a lot slicker and easier to pay and change in travel.
What was the main impetus or driver regarding the move from physical plastic cards to virtual cards and digital payments? Was it in terms of efficiency benefits or more to do with cost savings that drove that move to virtual cards?
So from my perspective, it's really both. So on the one hand side, it's just so much easier. And what I would say is really changed the minds of people around these virtual cards, just the ease in which you can use them on your mobile phone and include them frictionless into your digital journey. You don't have to punch in everything. It just makes it so much easier. So it's a beautiful thing, or something that makes the experience slicker and easier to use actually also helps you to cut costs and actually to some respects reduces fraud, because it's not easy to kind of pull your virtual card out of the mail, whereas it's much easier to do mail fraud on physical cards. So it's really on multiple levels that makes it just so much easier, and all of these things coming together is driving the increase in commercial cards.
And how do virtual cards help with optimizing data reporting and gathering business intelligence analytics? Is it a lot faster now for organizations to get those insights through virtual cards?
Absolutely, because the virtual cards bring together an ecosystem where they integrate into different systems, say into your SAP system, and automatically bring that out. And one of the ways that we can see that is, for example, when employees do their expenses, instead of having to type in everything, your card will automatically bring all of that up in your expense system, and it's just much easier to even that out. It saves time, and it also avoids mistakes, that you're missing something, that you're adding something in that wasn't there. So it just makes it so much slicker.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the flexibility that virtual cards give for things like setting spending controls or single use accounts, bulk payments, how do they compare with other corporate payment solutions in terms of the benefits that they give to corporates?
So I think it really depends on how much flexibility today you have in your corporate spending. And what I would say there is that probably bigger companies have been relatively well served with setting limits and being able to manage their payments much more effectively. whereas SMEs really struggle because they fall between, you know, what the consumers get and what the large corporates get. And so with these spending cards, you can get kind of almost that flexibility in and help you structure much more than you can today if you're falling between both of these. That there are obviously some things that the corporate cards don't do that effectively, and that really depends. And that's where you sit down and figure out which payment do I do through my corporate card and which payments do I do using my normal way of paying. But it can make it a lot slicker.
Looking at the overall market landscape right now, what role do challenger banks play in the corporate payment space at the moment, and how are they disrupting the corporate payment market?
So I'm sorry, Fred, on that question, do we have any data specifically on disruptor banks?
Not really a lot of data on this. That's more about the nature of the challenger banks and the fact that they are very often very digital per nature, rather than you know, having all these legacy systems to cope with when putting in place new offers.
Yeah. I also think kind of bringing open banking into that discussion. A lot of the challenger banks have come out and have started using open banking as a way of disrupting the market landscape. And I think that's really where open banking can play and disrupt a lot more. And so one of the things that is interesting is, you know, open banking's obviously mandated on the consumer side. It's going to be interesting how that comes through when it comes to business as well.
A lot of people have been quite negative about the prospects for open banking, but there seems to be, in the UK at least, a lot of uptake on the consumer side, and more transactions and account activity is going through open banking. So do you think it's going to take off over the next couple of years?
I absolutely do. I think open banking took a bit of time for people to come out and figure out, you know, get consumers to buy into it and help understand what it brings and come out with good services. But now we can really see those services coming out and the consumers taking up. And then, you know, the same thing goes that we discussed at the beginning. You know, if I'm having this experience as a consumer, why am I not having that experience as a corporate? And so this will permeate through into the corporate world. And I think that's where the disruptor and challenger banks come in. I think we're seeing quite a few fintechs focus on the corporate space. We haven't seen that many disruptor banks really focus on the corporate space. And you know, it's almost an opportunity for them to go there, or an opportunity for the banks to step up in that space and leverage some of the things that the experience that they've gathered in open banking to help make that a lot slicker. You know, a great example would be request to pay. We're now seeing request to pay, while it's been used mostly in, for example, in the Netherlands, where it's used quite a lot, been used consumer to consumer. We're now seeing it being used business to consumer, and you can imagine you can further elevate that business to business, and it just makes it a very slick. So for example, as a consumer, if I send out a request to pay to multiple people because I've split money for a gift, it actually shows me who's paid me and who hasn't. So, there's a lot of functionality that as an SME, for example, you could leverage from systems like that, make it a lot easier to run your collections.
How different is the UK and Europe to the rest of the world in terms of corporate payment usage and management, compared to, for example, the US, where obviously that's the biggest market for commercial payments? Do you think Europe is catching up or doing things differently in some regards?
So I find that Europe has more digital approach than the US has. We obviously in the US still, there is a lot of use of cards and there is a lot of use for checks. In Europe, obviously checks are very much not, there's still a bit of checks, obviously, but not in the same way as they are, and a lot more integration into your back end systems compared to the US. But what we're seeing in Europe is really the commercial cards are picking up because of the ease of use and the integration into those back-end systems, and we can see the growth really picking up over the next couple of years, right? That there's quite a considerable CAGR, which means, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the data here, which means that the use of commercial cards will have a CAGR of about 25% over the next 5 years. So you can imagine there's going to be a lot of activity and a lot of use here. And then I think the commercial cards are a really interesting use tool in these B2B ecosystems, where you can imagine that they will bring a lot of slickness into how the transactions are being processed. And obviously, I think the last piece, and I think that's really relevant to corporates, is that you can speed up getting paid. And we're bringing products to market around e-invoicing and get paid, which will bring a lot of further slickness into that market and help. Because sometimes it's funny, so sorry to digress, but sometimes it's not that a corporate doesn't want to pay. It's just that their systems, especially these large corporates, are just so complex to get the payment through. When you can ease that whole supply chain up, then the payment will come through a lot quicker than it sometimes does. And obviously that's very important to all the corporates in terms of cash flow.
So looking at what's new with corporate cards and payments right now in terms of technology channels, you've mentioned things like request to pay, but how do you see the development of instant real-time payments and other initiatives like crypto payments perhaps impacting corporate payments going forward?
So I think crypto payments is going to take time. The problem in my mind with crypto payments today, when you're actually paying in a cryptocurrency, the volatility of that currency, of those currencies, mean you don't know how much you're going to get paid. So I think in the corporate space, we're at least 5 to 10 years, my prediction, away from actually effectively being able, not so much the ledger, the distributed ledger technology, that's something else, but actually using cryptocurrency as a payment currency. Is just the volatility is not attractive. What we are seeing is moving from cryptocurrency into fiat currency and using that for the payment, but keeping the crypto assets, so not taking it out, because that's where you lose some of your value if you don't, just in time change to the payment, but that's more in the consumer and investment space. I think when it comes to the real-time rails, and that's where we can see cards and payments coming together, it's just the speed of the payments that's going to increase a lot more. And then, you know, when you look at what we see in terms of BNU, we see our partnership with Cardlay as really leapfrogging how we provide solutions in the commercial card space. It's really about that integration with all the core end systems and revolutionizing how the payments gets processed, makes it a lot slicker.
Mm-hmm. Following on from that automation, excuse me, automation information, how do you see this helping to impact in a positive way things like fund settlement, reporting, helping to drive cross-border trade?
So when you think about the integration, then obviously that makes it much easier. Cross-border trade with real-time networks coming together through RealNet, it can become a lot cheaper. It can become a lot faster. And obviously with some of the instant payment schemes, a lot more information can come through the instant message scheme with the payments. So what we see is these instant payment schemes get developed. There will be overlay services, particularly for corporate payments, that will include a lot more detail in the payment that will make it much more efficient for corporates to process payments, send payments out, and get payments back in, and then process them through all of their backend systems. And I think we've only yet started on that journey, right? There's so much opportunity in that space that we have not yet leveraged, and that we're currently working in different partnerships to bring to the market as FIS.
Expanding on that partnership model, you mentioned Cardlay as well before, who I spoke to last week, and they provided a lot of really good information, and we're really excited about the partnership with FIS in terms of what they can develop going forward. Do you see that partnership model growing and
Absolutely.
helping to evolve in corporate payments?
Absolutely. And so Cardlay is one example of our partnerships in this space, but we have a lot of focus in the B2B space, and there it's really all about connecting the different ecosystem partners and bringing new solutions to the market. So what you can expect from FIS over the next a couple of months, but also years, is a constant feed of new solutions in that space that are oftentimes in partnership with certain fintechs that just provide, for example, a layer on top of the core processing that FIS provides, and then we bring that combined power to the market. We can see solutions coming out also in the corporate space that are akin to the buy now, pay later in the consumer space. Obviously, around e-invoicing, we touched on that as well as you know, we spoke about request to pay, which is really about, you know, pulling the payment in from either your business partner or the consumer that you're working with. So a lot of innovation happening in this space.
Mm-hmm. Looking towards risks and opportunities, can you describe the challenges posed for corporate payments by things like security requirements and regulations?
Absolutely. So I think banks already struggle with keeping up with all the regulation in payments, and corporates really struggle with that as well. We could see that when SEPA came on board. So there's a huge opportunity for banks to keep the education going and almost make the regulation seamless for their corporate customers. But absolutely, you know, the for corporates, fraud can be a big issue because they are not offered the protection that consumers are offered. And so I think there is a huge opportunity as we digitalize these payments more, that because of that digitalization, you can actually prevent fraud a lot better because it's easier to oversee all the flows, to put in checks and balances in that fully digitalized end-to-end process than it is when you're going from it's digital to it's paper to it's digital to it's paper to it's digital. In each of those transformation steps, you know, information gets lost and they pose a security threat. So really digitalizing the end-to-end workflow is where a lot of the security can come in. But and then, you know, that digitalized work stream, it's easier to then apply upcoming regulation on top of that. So I think that's where the whole industry should challenge themselves, step away and out of the paper base.
Would FIS be considered an ideal case study to highlight the importance of the partnership model? And what do you think other providers could learn from your example?
So I think we could. We do a lot of partnerships, and what we've come up with is really a playbook, because what we see is obviously FIS is a very big fintech, one of the biggest in the world. And so for us to work with some smaller partners, it really requires a playbook. It really requires you as FIS to help that partner integrate and work with and almost have that mindset. So we've got like a fintech desk where we work through our playbook, and we ensure we've covered all the bases. We say, here, this is what we require, this is what you require to make those collaborations much more effective and efficient. And I think the collaboration with Cardlay is a great example of that. That's come to market very quickly and is really exciting in terms of what we can bring to bear there.
So looking at exploration of strategies, how do commercial core programs support an organisation's overall financial strategy? And what would you describe as the main cost and operational benefits for things like cash flow, fraud protection and reporting?
Okay, so when it comes to fraud protection and reporting, it's obviously eased a lot, stepping away from your normal kind of paper-based systems. And you can then also look at making specific arrangements in terms of what fraud protection you're offered against some of your purchases, depending on the scheme that you're using, whereas you don't get that offered in your normal purchase program. And so we've seen significant reduction in fraud happen there, and therefore we think that for corporates it's a really important point to consider when they're looking at how are we going to process our corporate payments. We see operational efficiencies increase everywhere from 25 to 50%, just because you don't need the paper base. And one of the things that we've seen corporates really struggle through the pandemic is when you're not in the office, where's the mail going? Yeah, it's really made corporates question how they need to process things more in a digital form.
So looking at key strategies for organisations. Can you briefly explain the essential components of an optimal e-payment strategy for things like using commercial cards, automated clearing, bill payments, and the importance of having a good back-end platform in place?
So I think everything starts and ends with a good back-end platform. And then when, we kind of making the link between the corporate and the consumer space again, in the consumer space, there's a lot of talk of frictionless payments or invisible payments. And what we describe it as FIS, we talk about friction-right payments. Because depending on the amount that you're spending and the frequency that you're spending it in, you want something to go very smoothly, or you actually want friction right, which is you want to double check what you're doing depending on the type of payment. And I think that when you have the right back office systems, you can go, here are my payments, here's the level of scrutiny that I want on each of those payments, here's the level of automation that I want with all these payments to come, depending on value and volume. And so that when it comes to then digitalizing that and automating that, you can then also choose very effectively which payment rails you want it to go through, because depending on the payment rails it goes through, it will give you further automation, it will give you further protection, it will apply further scrutiny on that, and that really can help corporate structure their payments correctly.
Mm-hmm. So what
just checking, did that answer the question? Or was that a surprising response?
That was very comprehensive, thank you. So what steps must be taken for an organisation to set up a successful corporate payments or commercial cards strategy?
So I would say come and talk to FIS. I think it's important that an organization put that on their strategy sheet. It's funny how few organizations think about effectively getting paid as a key strategy. Because effectively getting paid or effectively asking for getting a payment is such a crucial thing to your business success. And so I would say make payments, either getting paid or paying, a key part of your strategy. Because apologies.
That's okay.
Because obviously also the way that you treat your suppliers and your supply chain is really important. So it's not just about how do I get the money in, it's also how do I get the money out, and managing that effectively. And so I think as we further digitalize the whole of our world, putting payments on the strategic agenda and managing that strategically and getting good advice on how to do that effectively is what I would say is imperative for corporates. Oftentimes that whole process is an afterthought because that's not the core business of most companies if you're not in the financial sector. So then put it on the strategic agenda and then figure out, can I be good in this? Or do I find the right partner? Do I get the right advice? And that's where, fintechs can come in and really say, okay, this is how we can make this more effective for you. So you need to decide on your right partnerships, your right banking partnership, your right invoicing partnership, and your back office partnership.
Do you find that a lot of your clients, when they're implementing a corporate payment solution, it helps them to negotiate better terms or conditions with the suppliers that they're working with?
That's a really interesting question. So when you are effective at paying, that can really come to bear in how you negotiate, and making that a part of the negotiation, making the payment terms a part of the negotiation really brings that out. I depends on the size of the organization whether they really bring that in and make that a large part of what they're negotiating. But it can be,
Okay,
if you're conscious about it, right? Just as I discussed, I like to pay, so I'm conscious about how I pay. A lot of people don't care about it. Yeah,
I like to pay on time.
yeah, well, again, paying on time is a strategy. There are companies out there, and it's also, and I think if you think about this in the context of culture, that there is a big difference in how payment habits culturally, and those come back in the corporate world, right? The more southern you get, the worse you have to expect your payments going to be, just because the culture is, well, I can wait. It's so figuring that out when you go out and you go into business. It's not just about what service is somebody providing. It's like, but am I going to be able to get paid or pay effectively, and what can I expect? It's something important to take into consideration.
So looking at FIS specifically, how does FIS offer the right solutions for organisations, and what are the unique capabilities that you can offer?
So obviously, when you look at all the organizations that FIS serve, we really divide it into different segments, and then we apply those solutions to each of those segments. And I think that makes it, the whole breadth of our solution makes us really unique, because we can go further than just the payment and provide more solutions around that. But we can also, if there's one thing you want to do, we can do that really, really well. I would say our partnership with Cardlay is really unique. Our express pay solution that we're bringing out in the travel industry is really unique, and we're just coming to market with a solution that's called Get Paid, to help corporates get paid. That is going to be really unique. And what I would say is our commitment in that space, in the B2B and the B2C space, means that we're going to keep coming out with additional solutions in that space to make it better and better for everybody.